Hello and welcome to my tutorial. Today I'm going to take you through how I process the Milky Way. The photo that I've chosen to do it on is my most liked photo. It got the most engagement, and I'm just going to take you through my entire workflow and process of how I did it from start to finish. So let's get straight into it. We're here in Lightroom. And this is a shot I took at a local spot during blue hour. If you want the clearest shots, I suggest that you shoot your foregrounds during blue hour, and then you can shoot your Milky Way images later on in the night. To get an even cleaner image, I tracked the Milky Way. So you can see here, this is 600 seconds, which is 10 minutes at f4. 24mm at ISO 400. These are the best settings that I've found. The time can vary, and so can the ISO depending where you are. So yeah, I've got six shots here. Now we're going to stack those in Photoshop before we blend them. And yeah, so that'll be the stacking component. And then we'll color correct and color grade and go on from there. But in Lightroom, what I would like to do is to scroll down here and just click these two boxes before I do anything. And we can do these as well. If you shift click those, remove chromatic aberration. Before I do that, I'll show you. So there's a tiny bit of trailing, but it's 10 minutes with no auto guiding, so it's actually not too bad. But you see this color here on some of the stars, that's chromatic aberration. So if we remove that, you can see it disappears off and on. So that's a good thing to get into doing, and I like to do that because it gets rid of the vignette and straightens it out. And corrects the lens that you're using. And I like to do that because later on in Photoshop you can manually put the vignette back in, and it's easier for it to stack when it's nice and straight without any distortion. So with that, we can shift click all those, and then we can just go to sync, and that will do all the settings. Here, I just have them all checked and then just synchronize. So once they're all done, we can shift click them all and we can take them into Photoshop. And we want to open as layers in Photoshop. Okay, now they're all in here. You can do this separate and that will prevent this happening, but that's alright, we'll fix that. So I'm going to turn that one off and stick it down the bottom because we don't really need that until later. What we're going to do is shift click all these. Now these are tracked, so technically the stars shouldn't have moved, it's just the foreground. But we will go to edit and align these, and the only thing I've got selected is auto, and we'll just auto align them. That's aligned now, and you can see it's only just clipped that tiny little bit, so you can go through manually and look to see if they've moved, but it's pretty good, definitely when you're tracking. So once that's done, we can right click and convert to smart object, and that's done. Now I want to create a copy of this. You can do Control or Command J, and then we're going to be using some smart object filters. So you go layer, smart objects, and then stack mode, and these two stack modes, median and mean, we're going to be using those. So these take an average of all the pixels of all the layers and they merge them together, and it really cleans up your image. So I'm just going to go with what's on the list here, so mean first, and let that run. That's done. So you can rename these, but it's not really necessary because we're going to delete the one that we don't want. So we can go up to Layer, Smart Objects, Stack Mode, and Median this time. Once that's done, we can have a look which one we're going to keep. So zoom in here, and we can click this off and on, and you can see there's 0 changes. So we can zoom back out and we'll look at this foreground, see how it's moving. There's a difference. So that one's a bit blurry and it's taking up more space than the other one. So when you're blending, you want as much of the Milky Way as possible. So it's only a tiny bit, but you don't really want that black foreground. So the mean didn't really work out this time, which is usually the case. Median's the better one. So once that's done, we can rasterize this. There we go. So that's done. Now, I like to kind of get my Milky Way pretty close to being fully edited, or at least to a point where I only have to do fine adjustments. So we can make a copy of this, Control Command J, and we're going to color correct this before anything. So there's a really good way, it's pretty easy. We can go to curves, and then this little box that people forget about, we can go to auto options, and now find dark and light colors. Now what that does is it finds the darkest dark point and the lightest light point, so your whites and your blacks. So we can go to that. Now the only thing we need to find is the grays. So we can go new layer. I just press M for marquee tool, and then Control or Command A to select the whole thing, and then we can right click, fill with 50% grey, and then we can change our blending mode to difference. And now it looks pretty terrible at the moment, but if we go down to here and choose threshold and drag this slider all the way down to either 1 or 2, we can zoom right in here. There's 1 pixel, so that's the first bit of the 50% grey layer coming through, and that's what we want. So this is zoomed in at 13,000%, but you can either mark this with your eyedropper tool, but to save time, I just put it in this vicinity here, and that way I can just click there, and I'll show you what I mean. So we don't need these 2 layers anymore, so we can shift, click those 2, and then just backspace or delete button, and they're gone. And now this middle one here is our set gray point, and we can just click there. Now that's done. Now if you hold Control or Command 0, that should give you the full screen. Now we can close that, and then we can go off and on, and you can see the big difference. So this is a more natural color gradient. So once that's done, we can actually get rid of that because we don't really need it. And now what I like to do is merge these 2, but you can merge visible. So that's Shift, Command, Alt, and E. And then, so that's all the visible layers have merged into one. And then now I want to make a copy of that. So Command Control J, and we're going to go and make a selection on the stars, because I like to have my main subject, the Milky Way, as the main focus, and all these stars are distracting for me. And I like the nebulosity to come through within the core of the Milky Way. So by doing that, there's a few different ways. I do have a video on YouTube that you can watch where you go into the channels and make a selection, but the best way, and the way that I use it mostly, is by going to select color range, and the stars are usually white or the brightest part, so we can click the highlights and bring the fuzziness all the way up and the range all the way up there, and then just press OK, and that's going to give us our selection. And we can just make our layer mask, and if we hold Alt or Option and you click, this is our layer mask. So all the white is selected and all the black is not. And then you can just do the same to get out of that. Now we're going to get rid of some of these stars. So you go to Filter, Other, Minimum. Now with this, you just want to use a radius of 1 pixel and roundness because the stars are round. You don't want to do really anything any higher because it can absolutely like destroy your photo. So I'm just going to press OK. And then you can go off and on. You can't really see a big difference, but we're going to merge visible again. So Control Shift Alt and E. And now we're going to go select color range, do the same thing. And then create our layer mask, but this time we're going to invert the mask. So Control Command I, and if we hold Alt Option and click, there's our mask. You can just get out of that, and then if you press Control Alt and F, that will redo the last filter that we used. Boom, there we go. So now that one makes a huge difference. So that's nearly where I want it. You can see all this nebulosity's coming through. Look how much distraction there is there. This is one of the most amazing things. I think I love the Milky Ways when they look really nice and clean. Now we can merge visible once again, and we can go to Filter and go to Noise, and now to clean it up just a little bit more, we can select this dust and scratches, and now I only want 1 pixel, and then go back here and then go to median and 1 also. And then you can go before and after. It's just that tiny little extra bit. So that's pretty much the Milky Way prepped. We can make another copy of this, Control or Command J, and then go up to Filter, Camera Raw, and then you can edit the Milky Way however you like. If you like the Milky Way more blue or green or yellow or pink, you can muck around with these settings. And if you want to change them back, you can just double click that. What I like to do in either Lightroom or here is if you boost the saturation, then you can change this down just very slightly until you think it looks kind of natural. And then we can double click that and then see how I've changed it, and it's even more natural now. These are the natural Milky Way colors. So I think it's a little bit dark, so I think we could boost this up maybe 1/4 of a stop, and maybe a little bit of contrast, highlights, something like that. That looks pretty good to me. I don't really want to change the color or make it too oversaturated. I like that normal, natural look. So there we go. So if we shift click all these and press Control or Command G, that makes a group. So we went from this to that, and Like, I think that's a huge improvement, but it's up to everyone's taste. So that's done now. We can ungroup those. We could merge all these because that's the Milky Way done, to have a cleaner workflow, because we don't really need to do anything else. But we could also leave these layer masks in a group so we can use them later on. So I might just do that. We can just group them again until we get this sorted. So I'm just going to zoom out here, and I'm going to press C for crop, and I'm going to change the ratio to 4:6, and then press OK. And depending on your settings with the crop, this might be checked. So uncheck the delete crop pixels. So when you crop, you've still got everything behind it. So we'll just go OK. We'll get rid of that later. So now here comes the fun part, which is going to be selecting the sky separate to the foreground, and we've got some trees here, and trees are some of the hardest things that you can mask in Photoshop. So we'll get stuck into that right now. Okay, so now I want to make a copy of this layer, Control or Command J, and we are going to, we can rename these. Every photo is going to be different with the masks, but what I do is I go through my channels and try and find the best selection here. So with the channels, you got your red, green and blue, which make up your RGB. What we want is the sky to be as white as possible and the foreground to be as black as possible. So that one's looks not that great. The green, that's a bit better. Blue, that's a lot better. So we're going to go with blue. Now if you press Control or Command and then click on it, that is going to create our selection for the blue channel. And then we go back to layers and make a layer mask. And now if we press Alt and Option, Alt or Option and click it, there's our layer mask. And now we're going to alter the layer mask. So there's a few ways you can do this. You can do it via curves or levels. In this case, we'll just do levels. So you can press Control or Command L, and that will bring up our levels. Alright, now once this is up, we can play around with these sliders and try and get the selection that we want. So as I said before, we want to try and get the sky as white as possible and the foreground as black as possible. So that's pretty good. Now we want to try and get this as white as possible without losing some leaves. As long as it's pure white, like 100% white around the edge, then we can just, after that, when we make this selection, we can just go through and paint out everything. It's just these edges that we want to be careful of. So that's not too bad. It's pretty good. can go through and have a look. That might be a bit. Stretch it a bit more. Alright, that looks pretty good. So I can zoom back out. And now we just hit OK. So now that's our selection altered. And now there's another few ways of doing this. Just say we had some grey. Now if this is less than 50%, we can go up to here and overlay with our brush. So B for brush and overlay. And you want to use, depending what you're doing, usually a hard brush and at full opacity. And now if we change that to white, see how it goes to 100% white. And that's because this is below 50% grey. But if we had something like this that was black or over 50% grey, we can change that back to 100% and overlay, and then so if we've got black selected, it goes 100% black. And see that? It won't touch the white. And then if we press X to scroll through your foreground colors, you can see that the white is just making the grey a little bit whiter. And you can click again and again until it's fully. But the 100%, it just won't do it. So it's a good thing when you're trying to mask stuff out. It can really help when you're going around these like really hard edges or trees or just really difficult things where there's still a few pixels around what you want selected. So that's just a good little tip. But for out here, you can just do the normal at 100% and choose your foreground color. And we can get rid of that and just make sure we've got a really good selection. We can probably just stretch the image to get rid of that last little bit, but we'll fix that up later. And if you press D, that will default the foreground color to the 100% color that's selected. So if I press D, that will go to 100% white. And then if I press X, it'll be 100% black. So we can just paint that in there. Get rid of that. Alright, so I think that's our selection done. Now after this, we see if all our work is worth it. So I'm just going to open this, ungroup. Now that was our final Milky Way there. So we can just pull this up to the top, or we could make a copy and just leave that there, but suit yourself. Okay, now we want to position this where we want it. So you can just change the opacity down a little bit, like 20%, or you can change the blending mode, whatever. Now if you press V, this is like your move tool. And now we can place it wherever we want. So originally I lined this up with Photo Pills. It's an app that I use, and the exact alignment was about there. So that all fits in pretty well. So I'm just going to go with that, and we can put the opacity back up to 100%. And now we just click and grab this and drop it onto that. And now at first I've got all this blue fringing, which is sometimes really annoying, but we're going to try a few things to get rid of that. One is because this is shot at blue hour, so this has got a blue tinge to it, so we can fix that up. So I'm going to grab this and go to filter, camera raw, and what I like to do is I like to match my scenes before I go any further. So I'm going to warm that up a bit, just a tiny bit, and get rid of the highlights and the whites, and then press OK. So there's some's disappeared already. And now what I want to do is grab the hue. I can zoom in here and grab the blues, and we can get rid of that and drag the lightness down. So that's black. And there we go. There's all the fringing gone. Now, if you want that blue look, it automatically creates like a layer mask. So that's already selected, and we can just hide that and press B for our brush. And now we want a soft brush with, we can use 100% opacity. You can see how blue it was now. You can't really see it when it's not there. So that's like too blue for my liking. So you can just get rid of that and go Control or Command Z, get rid of that. I'm going to change this down to maybe 20% and paint that in. And just avoid the leaves, because we don't want to ruin all that work that we just did. So that's about alright. I'm going to go back up to 100%, and then D, and then X, and then just, oops, get rid of that, because we don't want that in the trees, because it looks really unnatural. So, okay, once that's done, now it's starting to look pretty good. What I like to do now is merge visible, so I've just got like a fresh layer to work on. You can do it this way. It is destructive, or there's other ways. You can use like curves and levels and brightness and all these different things here, which are just adjustment layers. And then we can use this layer mask on those or on the merged layer. It doesn't really matter. What I want to do now is create some airglow and use that as like a light source, because our eyes are attracted to different contrasts in the images. Some people think it's the brightness, but it's actually the contrast. So the Milky Way is there, and I want the viewer's eyes to go to the center. That's why I took the photo of the road, because you can see the lines leading into the center of the image. And just another thing, if you've done all that work with your layer mask, we can just click this little link, and now that's not linked anymore. So we can press V, and we can move this Milky Way around without having to worry about that layer mask. So that's a really handy tip if you didn't know about it. So yeah, I'm going to leave that about there. I didn't really like it so much over there. We can also press Control or Command T and we can move it even more. So pretty sure this is how it actually was. About there's good. And now we've got this little bit up here. We can either warp this or we can try and press L for our lasso, and let's see if this will work. So that once that's selected, you can right click and then fill with content aware, color adaptation, normal 100%. See if it does a good job. There we go. It's not too bad. So you can either do that or we can undo that. And we can press V for our tool again and Control or Command T, right click, warp. Now, got to be careful doing this because it could warp and ruin the image. But if you just do it a tiny bit, let that load, no one's gonna know. So once that's done, we can go on with our light source. So create a new layer, and we're going to press B for brush, and we're going to use a soft brush, a nice big one. But what we need, you can go through here and choose a color, but the quickest and easiest way is pressing I for your eyedropper, and we want to try and get a color similar to airglow. I like to use that beigey yellowy color, kind of. It's similar to the street lights and house lights. So if I press B again for our brush, and we're just going to be at 100% and click there. Now we can change our blending mode to linear dodge add. And then we can get this layer mask that we made before and press Alt or Option and just click it and grab it, and now it's behind there. And so that's a bit too colorful for my liking. So we'll just grab this hue and saturation adjustment layer, and we're going to clip it to this layer here so it only affects that. And now I can desaturate not letting me zoom in. So we can desaturate it however much you want. And we can also change the hue of it too. So I kind of like that a bit more. And we can also darken it or brighten it. But we can also do that with the opacity. So I'm going to leave it like that. And then I'm going to click that and then bring it down to maybe about 20%, I think. Don't want it too powerful. So we want it about there. And I'm just going to merge these, change that back to linear dodge add. So then that's itself. And then we can create a new layer. Now I just want this brighter in the center. We're going to also get a few different colors too. not that. Something a little brighter. Not having much luck, are we? So you can do different ones. We can also do this too. Change that, merge these. Change the linear dodge as well. It's really bright at the moment, but we'll change that. Bring the opacity down, and then bring that up. So this is just personal preference. You can make as many adjustment layers and merge them all together and make different brightnesses. So I can also do this again. Like that. And then with all of these, you can also create a blur to make it even more realistic. But I'm not going to use that one. But I'm going to merge these two. I'm just going to leave it like that for now. That doesn't look too bad. There's actually houses over here, so I like to try and create the scene how it was, as realistic as possible. I'm just going to brighten that tiny bit. Alright, sweet. So now it's starting to get there. Now what I want to do is kind of lighten up the road here. Now you can do many different ways. We can create levels, curves, and just brighten up the road. You can hide that, and then you can invert this by Control or Command I, and then you get your brush B, and like you can brush in where you want the viewer's eyes to go. Something like that. But I tend to like dodging and burning. So if we create a new layer, press M for your marquee tool and Control A, right click and fill with 50% grey. And then change this to soft light. Deselect that. And then press O for your dodge and burn. Make sure it's on dodge. And that's a pretty dark area, so we'll go shadows. We can slowly brighten this area up, and then we can go to our midtones. You can see that starting to brighten up. And then our highlights. But that tends to lose its contrast, which I don't really like. What I normally like to do is to merge visible all these layers. So I've got a fresh layer to start on. And if you go up to camera raw, we can brighten up the scene a little bit. And then you can also paint that in. And then we'll just create a black layer mask, which is the opposite to the white one. You hold Control or Option and then just click the layer mask and it'll invert it. And again, you can paint this in. Something like that. And now I want to create a vignette. So one way of doing that is, like I showed you before, we can just darken the image and then invert that, and then B, that's a black layer mask, so we can click white foreground. I'm going to zoom out and get our biggest brush. And create. Our vignette. So again, this is forcing the viewer's eyes to the center of the image. I might just brighten up that just a tiny bit more. Just invert that, grab our brush. And there we go. So yeah, there's pretty much the finished image. You can add whatever else you want to this image. Yeah, watermark. The only other thing that I would recommend is sharpening. There's lots of ways of doing this. If we merge visible, then you can go down to sharpen, and there's all these different ones. You can do a normal sharpen, unsharp mask, all that stuff. But there's one way that I like to do it. We can go up to here and go into camera raw, and now we can zoom in. And we can sharpen as much as we want. And then if you press Alt or Option on a Mac and then click and hold this, it'll show you the radius. So all the white is what it's going to be affecting. And you can do the same with the detail. And then we can mask that out too. So the white, just like our layer mask, that white is only going to be affected and the black isn't. So you can see there's a massive difference there. It's a lot sharper. Zoom in. Just toggle that off and on. It's nice and sharp now. So after sharpening, there's one more thing I like to do, and that's the Orton effect. And we can do that by just making a new layer, merge visible, and we can go to blur, Gaussian blur, about 24 is fine. And then we can go up to levels, and we can just tweak that a bit. Make sure it's clipped to this layer, and then drop that down to about 10%, and you can see it's just that little glowy, ethereal look. And we can also double click on here and bring up our blend if box, and if we slide this over and then use Command or Alt to split these two, you can erase it from the shadow so it's only affecting the highlights. What we've gone through is we've prepped our photos in Lightroom, got rid of the chromatic aberration and kind of flattened out our image and got rid of the lens defects and the distortion. And then we brought our images into Photoshop, where we've stacked them and we've color corrected them. We've done a little bit of color grading with the different colors, and we've created our masks for the sky and foreground to suit our scene, this particular image. But using that levels on your masks or the curves, you should be able to get a mask for pretty much any photo. So that's a great tool to use in future photos. After we created that mask, we blended the two images together, and then we matched them to make them more realistic. And also we touched on the use of light and shadow, and to target our viewers' attention to our main focus, which in this image is the Milky Way and the road leading into it, and myself standing up on that mountain. We have sharpened the image, done a little Orton effect for a kind of like a dreamy look, and then then it's just down to saving your file. What I tend to do with all this work that we've done here is, if you go up to File and then Save As, and you go into wherever you're going to save it, I like to save it as a PSB image. Now, this will save all the work, all the layers as they are right now. And then that way, if I want to alter my image later on, I don't have to redo everything. So that's one good way. And then if I'm just going to transfer it to my phone, I won't even do that. I'll just right click and flatten the image, and then Control or Command S and save it, and that should go back into Lightroom. So I'll just test it, and boom, there it is in Lightroom. And then you can just export into wherever, onto your phone, and then upload it into Instagram or Facebook, and you'll be able to view it on your phone. And just one thing I noticed, this little thing here, if you press that little lock, it unlocks it. Control or Command T, if you zoom out and hold Shift and Alt or Command, and just, there we go, stretch it out. And then now it's perfect, and we got rid of that line. But yeah, so that's it from start to finish, my process on how to create my Milky Way images. I just want to say thank you again. I hope to be making some more later on. So thanks again, and bye for now.